This was a very strange year in many ways. On the one hand, we reached a huge business milestone, 10 million in lifetime revenue. And at the same time, the very same year was the worst year we've had in now 11 years of the existence of my business. So I sat down over the last couple weeks, spent a few hours journaling and meditating and reflecting to try to really identify the most important lessons learned from 2024. The first lesson that I took away from this year, whenever a negative event happens in the external world, it's only if it changes my relationship with myself or it breaks my connection with myself that it causes me pain. So let's say, for example, as actually happened, the business lost money this year. That fact in itself, it's just a data point. It's just something that happened. It doesn't inherently mean anything. The moment it becomes painful, the moment it causes suffering, is if I use that event, if I interpret that event to judge myself or to condemn myself or to doubt myself or to lose faith in myself. And so I think this past year I did do a little bit of self-judgment, a little bit of self-condemnation. And I'm taking this moment at the end of the year and the beginning of the next one to just remind myself that the entire reason I'm an entrepreneur is to learn to understand myself, to accept myself, to love myself. It's really a journey of personal growth and personal development. Things can happen in the external world and it doesn't really have anything to do with me. I don't have to take it personally. But if I can just continue trusting myself and believing in myself, it's fine. The second lesson is that there's always a trade-off. So what I found is that if I'm facing a certain decision in my business and there doesn't seem to be a trade-off, I don't see any trade-off, there's one of two reasons. One is I just don't know what the trade-off is, or two, the decision just doesn't matter very much. When we decided to move to Mexico, we decided to keep our house in Long Beach, and that felt like the best of both worlds. But now I'm realizing the trade-off, which is it's so expensive to maintain two separate households. To a certain extent, the rest of the world becomes less accessible to us. So what I'm taking away from this is anytime I'm making a decision to make the trade-off explicit, to really think about and try to identify what am I losing? What is the other side of the coin? What is the cost of this decision? Because there always is one. It's just a matter of whether I'm going to be aware of it or not. My third lesson, as an entrepreneur especially, you're always and forever just trying to figure out what the heck is going on. You know, reaching these big milestones, 10 million in lifetime revenue, 3 million in lifetime profit. I suppose that qualifies me as a successful entrepreneur. I am a successful entrepreneur, but it's, I think, really important that I definitely don't get a big ego about it. Don't think that I've arrived somewhere, that I'm finished with the experimentation and the learning. As I look back on the last year and the last 10 years, in a way, I'm still just trying to figure out what is going on in my environment, what is going on in the market, what am I building or creating that's valuable, what do my customers want? The very same questions that I was trying to figure out 10 years ago. There's an aspect of creating anything new, whether it's a company or something else, where the discovery never ends. The discovery is, in a sense, infinite. And I'm always going to be a beginner. I'm always going to be in the early stages of my journey, even if I've been on that journey for many, many years. My fourth lesson, nothing is truly evergreen. Everything is changing all the time until the end of time. When I first became self-employed and started this business, I knew that this world of technology in which I live and this world of media is constantly changing. It's in constant flux. I knew that. But I had this idea, this assumption that I could focus my attention on evergreen principles. And if you look at the building a second brain method, the building a second brain content that we create, on the surface, it seems evergreen. It seems like it's gonna last a long time. But then AI arrived.
I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle.
And I actually think the principles are evergreen. They are actually still valid, but the way that they're applied, the way that they're expressed or manifested has so radically changed in just a couple of years that in a sense, I have to start over anyway. We can't hold back the tide of change, nor would we want to. At best, we have just a short period of stability and certainty before the raging ocean, the raging storm around us forces us to completely reorient ourselves. What I take away from that is just the importance, again, of being open to change, adaptable, being willing to adapt, being willing to change my habits, my mindset, my identity, my strategy for my business, and just my strategy for life, honestly. My fifth lesson, diversification is overrated, at least when it comes to the internet. I realized through my journaling and my reflection that over the past few years, I've had kind of a theory in mind for how the business needed to evolve. My assumption was that in the early years, let's say the first 5, 6, 7 years, the smart thing to do was to focus 100% of my energy on one thing, to create a breakthrough product, which in my case was the building a second brain ecosystem, and to do that up to a certain point. And that point was when we had a so-called critical mass. I thought once we had, let's say, a few 100,000 subscribers and followers, once we had a few thousand customers, once we had a few $1 million in revenue, then I thought we should switch our strategy, and this is exactly what we did, to instead of focus on one product, to diversify. That's what you hear, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't stake it all and bet on just one thing. Diversify. And so we did that over just really the past year, 2024. We branched out from making money, probably 95% of our money in one way, which was the building a second brain cohorts. We diversified to making money a bunch of different ways. Sponsored YouTube videos, self-paced courses, sponsored newsletters, books, a membership, all these different things. I think we went from 1 to 6 different ways of making money, which sounds fantastic. That sounds like it should have led to a lot of growth, but it didn't. It didn't. What I found is it took a lot of time and effort, but the results have been kind of disappointing. The business has actually shrunk by about 35% versus the year before, versus 2023, and it's down by more than half since the peak of the pandemic in 2021. We find ourselves putting in a lot of work to build and then maintain all these different revenue streams, but the result is actually less money, less profit, and a smaller business. How is that for not a very successful experiment? I think diversification is good when it comes to your sources of meaning. That's something I also have done that's been successful, is I now get my meaning not just from work, but from my marriage, from my kids, from my home life. That has been a positive form of diversification. What has not worked, at least so far, is diversifying our online business. I really think there's something about the internet that rewards this kind of obsessive focus, and therefore it's really better to focus 100% of your attention and energy and time on one thing, given that on the internet, that one thing can scale almost without limit. My 6th lesson. Sometimes there is a single goal, the achievement of which makes all the other goals easier. Or another way of saying that, sometimes there's a single decision that makes all the other decisions easier. Sometimes there's a single project that if you complete it successfully, all the other projects will become much more feasible. If that's the case, and I think it is, it's really worth spending a significant amount of time and energy to identify what is that one goal? What is that one decision? What is that one project? I'm really taking some time here at the very beginning of January to really ask, what is the bottleneck? What is the one little piece of this machine that is limiting the performance of the entire machine? And instead of trying to spread my energy equally everywhere, all over the place, which is what I would typically do, I'm really trying to focus like a laser on what is that one bottleneck and to solve it and to fix that bottleneck before turning my attention elsewhere. So looking back over the different goals that I had set at the beginning of 2024, 1 year ago, it amazed me that this one decision, which was to move to Mexico, basically solved almost all my goals. I had a goal to be more mindful and less technology centric. That's also happened because in our town in Mexico, often the power goes out. It's just a much more grounded way of life. I had a goal to spend more time in nature. And that was quite hard to do when we were here in LA, where nature is so far away. Now we live in the mountains just outside of Mexico City, and we just open our front door and walk outside and we're in nature. So looking back, I realized I could have, put in all this effort for each one of these different projects that I had. And that would have been really hard and probably not that successful. Or I can do one thing. Given it's not an easy thing, it was a major decision to move to a different country, but that one move actually knocked down a ton of other barriers and made all my other goals, or most of my other goals, just far more likely to happen. And finally, my 7th takeaway, my 7th lesson, which might actually sound kind of wrong, or at least counterintuitive, that it's important to regularly disappoint people. I don't mean specifically try to disappoint someone just for the sake of disappointing them. What I realized is that if you never disappoint anyone, not in your personal life, not in your professional life, you don't disappoint anyone ever, there's only 2 possibilities for why that's the case. The first possibility is that you are perfectly upholding every aspect of your responsibilities across all the domains of your life at all times. Essentially, you're perfect. That's not a very likely possibility. The second possibility, which I think is far more likely, is that you're playing it safe. You're making your life so small. You're reducing your life. You're settling, you're compromising on your life so much that you never have to risk falling short of anyone's expectations. And as I say that, I recognize my past self as having done that, as having lowered my expectations, lowered my standards, reduced and kind of watered down my goals or even my values. If you're playing big in life, if you have big goals, you're going to have to disappoint people. You might actually have to get good at disappointing people, as in knowing how to do it gracefully, knowing how to let them down easy, learning how to apologize, learning how to feel disappointment yourself. Often when you see someone who's disappointed in you, you have to then feel disappointment. These are EQ, emotional intelligence skills. But I found kind of an extra bonus benefit, which is the people who react badly to being disappointed. So the people that you disappoint who don't take it well, who become angry or become vindictive or become manipulative, those are the people who don't respect your boundaries. Those are the people who won't take no for an answer, who don't understand that you're human and you have limits. And therefore, you actually want to find out who those people are as soon as possible and either distance yourself or in some cases completely remove them from your life. I know this sounds kind of brutal, it sounds kind of extreme, but I found as an entrepreneur and just someone who has a lot of ambitions and visions for my future, that disappointing people is just an unavoidable part of that. It's just part of the game. It's part of the experience. An example of this is writing my book. Over the past few months, I really pushed aside almost all my other projects and focused myself completely on writing my next book. And what I realized or remembered from the last time that I wrote a book is that when you push everything else aside, that really means pushing aside other people's expectations. People think that you're going to be in certain meetings. They think you're going to reply to emails by a certain time. They think you're going to show up to every, party or social event. And you just have to say no to those things. So the only way that I've found to create the space and the focus necessary to do something like write a book is by getting comfortable and in a way even embracing the fact that I'm going to have to disappoint people. And that's okay. But I really recommend during this very special time of year that is the end of the last year and the beginning of the next one, that you step back from your normal day-to-day life, do some journaling and some reflecting, and try to sense or identify what are the lessons that life is trying to teach you. And otherwise, I invite you to be part of our community, be part of our channel, stay engaged, and I'll continue to share some of my favorite practices and tips and tools and techniques for self-reflection and for self-understanding.